that William...
Absolutely. What we're really now seeing is that both of them, having posed as the victim for so long, are really the aggressors.
Harry's book, the biography, I mean, that's going to be devastating for the royal family because that's the only way that Harry can make his income.
The whole construction of her father, that man who in the end was abandoned by Meghan for months before...
Well, I think Harry is a very complicated person because he's not very intelligent and undoubtedly remains damaged by...
But ever since Meghan left Britain and then did the Oprah Winfrey interview, it's been really poisonous.
It was very early on in their relationship when Harry is bowled over by Meghan, is desperately in love. They don't want to come back in. They want all the perks, the titles and the baubles and the power, but don't want to actually...
Statements. I mean, she stood up at the United Nations. That was her most famous appearance before meeting Harry.
You know, Meghan I almost understood. She's a Hollywood B-list, to be charitable actress. She was a social climber. Her whole...
I do. And I think it's really quite sad that I won't be able to show, my children my homeland.
Are given the security that you desire if they deem that that there's a threat to you.
No, I choose people who don't want to be written about on the whole, and whose lives are shrouded in mystery.
Tom Bower just dropped something about Archie and Lilibet that's got the entire internet going crazy. And listen, this isn't random gossip. We're talking years of odd moments, missing photos, and timelines that never lined up. Harry and Meghan have been completely silent on this, and here's the thing. The more they refuse to address it, the more curious everyone gets.
William didn't know that Harry and Meghan had already recorded their poison.
The royal family keeps their distance. There's barely any photos of these kids with their own grandfather, and honestly, the whole situation just keeps getting weirder. So what's actually happening here? Let's dig into what Bower found and why this might be the biggest royal story nobody's discussing out loud. Now, before we dive in, I need you to hear what's ahead. We're going to break down every single inconsistency Bower pointed out.
The whole description she does of the Portland hospital, the birth, that was completely fabricated.
They haven't had any verification of who gave birth to those children, which is actually quite mandatory.
They kept Archie's birth private for over 8 hours. They did not tell people that he was actually born in Iraq.
The photos that look off, why the royal family's been keeping such an unusual distance. And the one thing Harry and Meghan won't address that's making this explode online. So hit that subscribe button right now and turn on notifications, because once you see how all these pieces connect, you're going to want to catch every update we drop. And smash that like button so this reaches more folks, because honestly, not enough channels are covering this. All right, let's get into what Tom Bower actually uncovered. So here's where this all starts. Tom Bower's been doing what he does best, digging into stories that other journalists won't touch. The guy literally said he chooses subjects whose lives are shrouded in mystery, people who want to hide their secrets.
They want to be powerful, and they want to hide their secrets, and I just love digging away to find out what they don't want us to know.
And when it comes to Archie and Lilibet arriving into the world, he's spotting some seriously odd inconsistencies that a lot of folks have been whispering about for years now. Get this, the Portland hospital situation doesn't add up. The story we were told about where and how everything went down has gaps in it that you can't ignore once you start paying attention. According to what Bower's uncovered, the entire description of what happened at Portland Hospital didn't match what was announced. We're talking about a complete mismatch between what was publicly stated and what apparently took place. And here's the kicker. Sources close to the situation claim Meghan never even intended to go there in the first place. The plan was supposedly a home delivery from the beginning. Date and time issues keep popping up too.
They'd had the baby at home. We know that they deceived the public about the birth date and time of the whole event.
When announcements came out, when events were supposed to happen versus when they did, none of it lines up the way you'd expect for a royal delivery. Consider every other royal baby you've seen. There's a very specific sequence of events, right? The announcement comes at a certain time, the images happen in a certain way. Everything follows a pattern that's been set for decades. But with Archie, the public got one story about dates and timing, but Bauer's research suggests that wasn't quite right. That's what's being highlighted based on comparing official statements with how events unfolded. And listen, this isn't Bauer throwing theories around. These are observations that regular people started noticing way back when it first happened. Social media was buzzing, forums were connecting dots, and the more you looked at it, the less sense it all made. Even statements that came out defending everything, you know, those long official responses.
We know she lied in her statement that she says that she didn't cooperate with Omid Scobie, and she said that she didn't
putting out a press release that isn't clear, that makes it sound like Meghan just went into labor, when really Archie had been born for several hours at that.
Contained information that didn't hold up under scrutiny. When you've got official announcements being called into question, that's when everything starts feeling off. The deal is, with every other royal baby, the sequence is crystal clear. There's protocol, there's tradition, there's a very specific way events unfold. William and Kate's bunch, you knew precisely when and where everything happened. Images came out right on schedule, the announcements followed the traditional format, and there was zero confusion about any of it. But with Archie and Lilibet, it felt like the rule book got tossed out completely. What makes Bauer's observations hit different is his track record. This isn't some random blogger or conspiracy channel. The guy wrote an entire book about Prince Charles and how he rehabilitated himself after Diana's passing.
And he stood in the St. George's Chapel, knowing that he'd done his family down in the Apple broadcast, the armchair broadcast.
That book was a #1 bestseller because he got to the real story. He's got a history of uncovering uncomfortable facts that people in power would rather keep buried. So when he starts highlighting these inconsistencies around the Sussex children, it carries weight. And here's what's fascinating. Bauer admits that most of Meghan's friends wouldn't even talk to him. He sent dozens and dozens of emails trying to get information, and most didn't even reply. The only family member who would speak was her father, who still loves her despite everything. That level of silence around someone's life. That's the kind of mystery Bauer loves to dig into. Because when everyone's that protective, when there's that much secrecy.
So when Meghan came along into the scene, I just thought, this is fascinating. How is this going to play out?
It usually means there's something worth protecting. So now let's talk about what everyone could actually see with their own eyes. Because here's where it gets interesting. You didn't need inside sources or investigative journalists to notice something felt off. Regular people watching from home started picking up on details that didn't sit right. First off, those pregnancy images. Listen, we've all seen pregnant women before, right? And we've definitely seen how royalty announces these moments. There's usually a natural progression, a consistent look to how things develop. But with Meghan's pregnancy announcements, folks started noticing the images looked weirdly staged, not in the normal posed for a photo shoot way.
This is all a double bluff. And hear me out on this, okay? This could have been a phantom pregnancy, and they could...
And irritated about the situation, because it's like, well, why would you do that? Why are you lying to people? Why are you trying to mislead people?
But in a way that felt overly controlled and choreographed. The bump would look different sizes in shots taken around the same time period. Sometimes it appeared one way, then in another image. From that same week, it looked entirely different. People weren't imagining this. You can go back and compare them yourself. Then there's how Archie's arrival was announced. Every single baby before him had followed a pretty standard protocol. There's an easel outside the palace, there's official statements at specific times, there's a whole process that's been the same for generations. But when Archie arrived, none of that happened the way it always had. The announcement came out of nowhere, the format was different, and honestly, it caught everyone off guard because it broke from everything we'd seen before.
magic. It's pretty amazing. And I mean, I have the two best guys in the world, so I'm really happy.
And this wasn't some small change. This was a total departure from how things are done. Now here's what really got people talking. The hospital pictures, or rather, the total lack of them. Consider William and Kate. Every single one of their children, there were shots outside the hospital. Kate in a dress, holding the baby, waving to cameras. It's iconic at this point. Princess Diana did the same. It's been the way these moments are presented to the public forever. But with Archie and Lilibet, nothing. No hospital steps, no customary presentation, no images that matched what every other member of the family has done. Instead, we got a very controlled, very private reveal that looked nothing like any birth before it.
2 epidurals, and with an epidural, she gave a bathtub birth to Archie.
And then there's probably the biggest red flag of all. Where are these little ones with the rest of the family? Seriously, consider this. George, Charlotte, and Louis are constantly seen with King Charles, with other senior members. At family events, you see them at Trooping the Color, at Christmas walks, at casual outings. There's tons of documentation of them being part of the crew. But Archie and Lilibet, they're basically invisible. There's almost nothing showing them with their grandfather, with any senior members, really. No candid family moments, no customary events, nothing that would typically come with being part of the firm. The contrast is impossible to miss. William and Kate's bunch are woven into the fabric of life at the palace.
Children were born that way, it would mean that Archie and Lily were no longer to be allowed in the line of succession.
You see them growing up in public, participating in family traditions, building relationships with their relatives on camera. But Harry and Meghan's too, it's like they exist in an entirely separate world. No warm moments with King Charles, no time with extended family, no evidence of the kind of bonding you'd expect from grandparents and grandchildren. And before anyone says, oh, they moved to America, that's why. Okay, but what about before they left? What about during visits? What about video calls that other members have shared? The absence is glaring. People started wondering, is this purely a choice about privacy, or is there something else happening? Because protecting your little ones is one thing.
At this point, we've got to the stage where almost every parent needs to be a first responder. And even the best first responders in the world.
Literally every celebrity does that to some degree. But having virtually zero documentation of them existing within your own family, that's different. That's a level of separation that goes beyond normal privacy concerns. Now let's talk about what's happening with Harry himself, because honestly, this is where the situation gets really concerning. Reports coming out of Montecito are painting a picture that's hard to ignore. The guy who used to champion mental health awareness, who talked openly about therapy and healing, he's struggling in ways that are becoming visible even from the outside. Friends and those close to this situation describe him as obsessed. We're not talking about normal parental protectiveness here. This is deeper.
That is a reaction to Meghan Markle's latest Instagram reel, where she shows her family going to a empty.
Harry's spending hours daily reading what folks are saying online about his family. Sources say he can't sleep properly anymore. He's up at all hours, doom scrolling through what's being said about Archie and Lilibet, watching strangers tear apart details of his life. The irony here is brutal. This is the same individual who built an entire platform around mental wellness. He's spoken at conferences, done documentaries, created foundations focused on helping others deal with trauma and anxiety. And now, those same coping mechanisms he preached about seem to have abandoned him entirely. Those who've known him for years say the change is dramatic. He's become withdrawn, unpredictable in his moods, snapping at those around him over minor incidents.
This was a terrible, awful, no good, dirty, rotten idea, much like the rest of Prince Harry's antics, but his
the easygoing prince who once charmed everyone, That side of Harry seems to have disappeared. What makes this even more painful is that fatherhood was supposed to be his salvation. In interviews, in the Netflix series, in conversations, being a dad was presented as what finally gave his life meaning. It was his redemption arc after years of feeling lost following his mother's passing. He talked about breaking generational trauma, about being the father he never fully got to have. That story was central to his new identity. It was his shield, his purpose, his reason for being outside of royalty. But now that very foundation is being questioned. And you can imagine what that does psychologically. If the core story you've told yourself and the world about who you are gets challenged like this, where does that leave you?
One of which we will get into today, which is that he plays loose and fast with the truth, i.e. he lies a lot.
Friends say he's paranoid, constantly worried about what's coming next, what else might get exposed or questioned. He's become difficult to be around, swinging between defensive anger and total shutdown. Here's the really devastating part. Harry's being painted in two equally unflattering ways, and neither one helps him. Some see him as a naive guy who got played, someone who fell so hard for Meghan that he didn't see what was happening around him. In this telling, he's a puppet, a victim of manipulation who's too blind or too stubborn to admit he's been taken for a ride. That's rough, but the alternative is even worse. The other framing positions him as fully aware, as an active participant in whatever's going on.
And so he became hypersensitive and blamed the media for the crashes of his relationships.
In this scenario, he's not a victim. He's complicit. He knows the deal and has been helping maintain whatever secret needs keeping. That take makes him look calculating and dishonest, the opposite of the authentic, hard-on-his-sleeve image he's cultivated for years. Neither of these framings gives him any power or dignity. He's either weak and foolish, or he's deceptive and untrustworthy. And the worst part? His silence on the whole situation lets both interpretations thrive. By not addressing anything directly, he's allowing folks to fill in the blanks however they want. And what they're filling in isn't pretty. The mental health advocate is watching his own state deteriorate in public view, and there's no strategy.
He's just a spoilt brat, isn't he? And he says that the king doesn't talk to him over this. Well, who can blame the king?
No response. No way out that doesn't make the situation worse. While Harry seems to be falling apart, Meghan's taking an entirely different route with all of this. And honestly, the contrast between how they're each handling the pressure couldn't be more stark. Where Harry's becoming visibly anxious and consumed by what's being said, Meghan's gone ice cold. Reports from those who've dealt with her recently describe a calculated, business-first mentality. There's no visible panic, no emotional breakdowns, no signs that any of this is getting under her skin, the way it clearly is with Harry. Instead, she's gone full strategic mode. The response has been methodical. Shut down discussions wherever possible, control the narrative through any means available, and never let them see you sweat.
Every time he does this, or Meghan does this type of thing, they've done it a lot, they've done it too much, it's always incredibly damaging.
The strategy seems to be about suppression. When stories pop up asking about details regarding the kids, the move isn't to provide clarity or transparency. It's to try and kill the discussion entirely. We're talking about a coordinated effort to silence anyone raising concerns. And look, that's a tactic, but here's the problem. It's backfiring spectacularly. Because attempting to forcefully shut down speculation rarely works the way you want it to. When someone's working that hard to stop a discussion from happening, it makes observers wonder why. If there's genuinely nothing to hide, if the answers are straightforward and innocent, why not address the concerns head on?
We have in this video, even though, of course, the kids, I'm sure, are told to do things at specific moments.
Why go to such lengths to prevent talk? Consider how this looks from the outside. You've got a couple who built their entire brand on authenticity and honesty. They left the palace discussing wanting to live their truth, about being transparent, about not playing the royal game anymore. That was the whole pitch. We're different, we're real, we're not hiding behind palace walls and PR teams. But now, when concerns arise about their own family, that commitment to openness appears to have evaporated. The harder Meghan pushes to suppress these inquiries, the more traction they gain. It's like trying to hold a beach ball underwater. The more force you apply, the more explosive it becomes when it finally pops up. Social media picks up on the attempts to control information.
They didn't want him to be a prince. He wasn't going to receive security. And also concerns and conversations about how dark his...
And instead of quieting down, forums start digging deeper. What's particularly interesting is how different this is from how she's handled other controversies in the past. When faced with criticism about other matters, she's been willing to speak out, to defend herself, to present her side. But on this specific issue, total lockdown. No explanations, no clarifications, an iron wall of silence backed by professional teams working to contain the chatter. And you've got to wonder about the toll this takes, because maintaining that level of control requires constant vigilance. It means monitoring what's being said, tracking who's saying it, coordinating responses, managing multiple channels of information flow. That's exhausting work, even for someone as composed as Meghan presents herself to be. The contrast with Harry's unraveling makes you examine their dynamic. Is she genuinely unbothered by this, or better at hiding the stress? Is she coaching him on how to handle it and he's not capable of maintaining the facade? Or is there a disconnect in how they each view what's happening? Maybe she sees it as manageable PR while he's having a full existential crisis about his identity as a father. What's clear is that her strategy isn't landing. The inquiries haven't gone away. If anything, they've intensified. The attempts to control information have created an air of defensiveness.
Well, that's not what people are hearing Harry at all, because he has lots of options to make himself and his family.
That makes casual observers start to wonder if maybe there's actually merit worth defending against. And in the court of public opinion, that perception shift can be devastating. Because once folks decide you're hiding something, providing actual answers becomes almost impossible. The trust is already broken. Now let's talk about the royal family's role in all of this, because their silence is deafening. King Charles, the grandfather to Archie and Lilibet, has kept a noticeable gap from Harry's children. And when you compare how he interacts with William and Kate's bunch versus Harry's, the difference is impossible to miss. Think about the images and videos we see of Charles with George, Charlotte, and Louis. There are countless instances captured. Him playing with them at gatherings, them sitting on his lap during official events, casual walks where you can see the genuine bond between grandfather and grandchildren. It's natural, it's warm, and it's documented regularly. But with Archie and Lilibet, that same energy doesn't exist. There's an absence of those candid grandfather interactions that would normally fill social media and official royal channels. And it's not just about imagery. Where are the birthday acknowledgements? When George, Charlotte, and Louis have birthdays, the Windsor social media accounts light up with tributes and well wishes. Sweet messages, throwback shots, everyone participating in celebrating these milestones. But when it comes to Archie and Lilibet's birthdays, nothing. No posts, no public acknowledgements, no warm messages from their grandfather or other senior members.
Hell, because they made me take these examinations. No, they didn't, dear. They made you safe.
It's like these two exist in a completely separate universe from the rest of the clan. Official portraits tell an even starker story. William and Kate's crew are constantly included in group shots, holiday cards, and ceremonial occasions. You see them at Trooping the Color on the balcony, at Christmas services, at various royal engagements throughout the year. They're woven into the fabric of Windsor life in a way that's visible and consistent. But Harry's little ones? They're ghosts in the album. No joint appearances, no inclusion in traditional gatherings, nothing that suggests they're being embraced as full members. Now, some might argue this is purely about geography. Harry and Meghan moved to California, so naturally there's less interaction.
As you know, everything that Prince Harry does attracts a lot of publicity, and that would be totally counter to what the King and the other members...
But that explanation doesn't hold up under scrutiny. What about before they left the UK? What about during their visits back? What about the modern technology that makes staying connected easier than ever? Other royals have managed to maintain relationships across distances. Video calls get shared, visits get documented, connections get maintained, but with Archie and Lilibet, even those basic touch points seem to be absent. The contrast becomes even more pronounced when you look at how other Windsors interact with William's 3 versus Harry's 2. There are images of George, Charlotte, and Louis with various aunts, uncles, and cousins. You see them at weddings, at public events, at private gatherings that occasionally get shared with the public. The trio are clearly integrated into the broader structure. But Archie and Lilibet, they might as well be invisible as far as the public record is concerned. This gap raises uncomfortable questions. Is it Harry and Meghan enforcing this separation to protect their offspring's privacy? That's certainly possible, and they've been vocal about wanting to shield them from public scrutiny, but there's a difference between limiting paparazzi exposure and having virtually no documented relationship with your own relatives. Even couples who value privacy usually allow some connection to grandparents, especially when those grandparents are aging and time is precious. Or is the separation coming from the other direction? Is the Windsor clan itself maintaining this gap intentionally? And if so, why? The most troubling theory suggests the palace might be protecting itself from something.
Exactly, because Meghan Markle was a close past associate of Prince Andrew.
That by keeping emotional and physical space from these youngsters, they're hedging against a potential situation that could become complicated down the road. It's a chilling thought that relatives would preemptively separate themselves from young ones based on suspicions or concerns about their background. But given everything else we've discussed, can you blame observers for? Here's something that doesn't get talked about enough in all of this, the money situation. Because while everyone's focused on the drama and the speculation, there's a very real economic pressure driving a lot of what we're seeing from Harry and Meghan. And honestly, understanding their cash bind explains a lot about why they can't just step back from the spotlight, even when things get this heated. When they left the royal structure, they walked away from the support that came with being working royals. That was their choice, and they were pretty clear about wanting independence. But here's what nobody really prepared for. Maintaining the lifestyle they want costs an astronomical amount. We're talking about a Montecito mansion worth millions, security costs running into the hundreds of thousands annually, staff salaries, travel, maintaining appearances in their social circle. It all adds up fast. The Netflix contract was supposed to be their golden ticket. Multi-year agreement, huge payout, creative freedom to tell their story their way. Same with the publishing contracts. Massive advances, guaranteed income, a platform to set the record straight.
And including in the Netflix series a private text message. Okay, they don't reveal the contents, but clearly a negative text message that William...
On paper, it looked like they'd secured their future. But there's a catch that's becoming increasingly apparent. They're locked into these agreements whether they like it or not. Think about what happens if they try to exit Netflix now. They'd have to return the advance, potentially face penalties for breach of contract, and lose their primary source of income. The publishing arrangements, same situation. These aren't casual partnerships they can abandon when things get uncomfortable. They're binding contracts with serious consequences for non-compliance. And here's where it gets really sticky. What they're obligated to produce is exactly what's fueling all the questions and criticism. Netflix wants intimate access to their lives. The streaming platform isn't paying millions for generic documentaries about charitable causes. They want the royal drama, the tension, the personal revelations. That's what subscribers tune in for. So Harry and Meghan are stuck in this position where they have to keep feeding the machine that's simultaneously destroying their credibility. The scrutiny around their offspring has made this trap even more obvious. Every documentary appearance, every interview, every public statement has to carefully navigate what they reveal about Archie and Lilibet while still providing enough material to satisfy their contractual obligations. It's an impossible balance, and you can see the strain it's creating. Reports suggest they're burning through cash faster than anticipated.
And suddenly she's an international star with quite a lot of money. And of course, in her terms, that's a great success.
The Montecito property alone requires massive upkeep. Security costs have apparently exceeded even pessimistic projections. And the lifestyle they're maintaining, the one that's necessary to stay relevant in their social circle, isn't cheap. Without the streaming and publishing income, they'd be in serious trouble pretty quickly. This explains why they can't just go quiet and let the questions die down. Silence doesn't pay the bills. Stepping back from public life doesn't fulfill their contractual obligations. They have to stay in the headlines, remain relevant, keep producing what people will watch and read, even when that production directly contributes to the problems they're facing. It's a vicious cycle. The more they put themselves out there to meet their obligations, the more material they give critics to work with. The more questions grow, the more stressful their lives become. But they can't afford to step aside because their entire structure depends on staying in the public eye. They've essentially monetized their own controversy, and now they're trapped by that choice. Some royal commentators have pointed out that if they lost both the streaming and publishing arrangements, they wouldn't be living in that Montecito estate anymore. They'd be looking at a very different lifestyle, probably in a much more modest setting. That's not a threat or judgment, it's simply the reality of their situation. They require these contracts to work, which means they have to keep playing the game, even when it's destroying their mental health and credibility.
But is all press good press? Harry and Meghan would argue no, because they don't like most of the press.
So we've covered what Tom Bowers said, what observers have noticed, how Harry and Meghan are each handling it, and what the royal family's doing. But now we need to address the elephant in the room, the inquiry that's moved from whispered forums to mainstream conversation. Why won't the Sussexes just clear this up? Because here's the deal. This entire situation could be resolved pretty quickly if they wanted it to be. The simplest way to end all the speculation, all the curiosity, all the theories, show some openness, share records, offer documentation, give audiences the clarity they're seeking. But that's not happening. Instead, we're getting deflection and attempts to shut down the conversation entirely. The calls for answers have gotten impossible to ignore at this point. What started as fringe internet discussions has exploded into trending topics on social media, segments on major news networks, articles in mainstream publications. This isn't conspiracy theorists in dark corners of the web anymore. Regular viewers who casually follow royal news are now wondering out loud, why does everything surrounding these births feel so different from every other royal birth in recent memory? And it's not like audiences are demanding anything unreasonable. They're not seeking private medical records or invasive personal information. They want the same level of openness that's been standard for royal births for generations. The same information that was freely shared for William and Kate's offspring.
Additionally, royal births like those of Prince William and Princess Catherine's children followed a very clear pattern.
The same documentation that nobody questioned because it followed established protocol. Consider it from a pure PR perspective. If you're facing concerns over something this fundamental, and you have straightforward answers that show everything is exactly as you've stated, why wouldn't you share them? Why let the theories grow and grow when you could shut them down immediately? The continued refusal to address these matters directly isn't making them disappear. It's adding fuel to the fire. And here's what makes this particularly damaging. The Sussexes built their entire post-royal brand on authenticity. They left the palace discussing living openly, being honest, rejecting the facade of royal life. That was their pitch to the public, their justification for everything they did. But when faced with direct inquiries regarding their own circumstances, that commitment to honesty seems to have vanished. The disconnect is what bothers observers. You can't spend years criticizing the royal institution for being secretive and closed off, then turn around and be even more secretive concerning your own life. You can't lecture on living authentically while refusing to be authentic regarding fundamental aspects of your existence. That gap between what they preach and what they practice is eroding whatever public goodwill they had left. What's particularly striking is how this contrasts with other celebrity parents who face similar scrutiny.
The auspices are bad because Harry was clearly forced to pay for his own fare up to Scotland.
Yeah.
He was told he had to make...
When concerns arise surrounding other high-profile births or family matters, most public figures either ignore it completely or address it head-on. They don't typically engage in this middle ground of aggressive suppression while refusing to answer anything. That middle approach almost always backfires because it looks like you're trying to hide something while also being defensive over hiding it. The longer this continues, the more entrenched everyone's positions become. Those who think something is off point to the lack of openness as confirmation they're on to something. Those who think it's all baseless gossip can't understand why the couple won't just show the gossips they're wrong. And stuck in the middle are two young ones who had no say in any of this, but are having their entire existence examined because their parents won't or can't offer straightforward answers. So here we are. What started as Tom Bower pointing out inconsistencies has turned into a full-blown crisis that the Sussexes can't seem to escape. And the tragedy here is that it didn't have to be this way. At any point, they could have addressed these concerns head-on. They could have provided the transparency that would have shut down the speculation before it gained this much momentum. But they didn't, and now we're watching their carefully constructed post-royal life crumble under the weight of unanswered inquiries. The perfect image they sold to the world. The modern couple breaking free from stuffy royal traditions, living authentically, raising their family away from the toxic environment they escaped. That narrative is falling apart. Each interview where they discussed openness and honesty now rings hollow when they won't be open and honest about the most basic aspects of their family. All those documentary moments that were supposed to showcase their genuine life now look staged and calculated. Harry's unraveling in real time, consumed by what strangers are saying online, unable to sleep, snapping at everyone around him. The mental health advocate who was supposed to have healed from his trauma is spiraling publicly. And the foundation of his entire identity, being a father, is being examined. That's not just a PR problem, that's an existential crisis playing out in front of millions. Meghan's cold, calculated approach isn't helping either. While Harry crumbles, she's trying to control and suppress, which only makes matters worse. Each attempt to silence critics just convinces more observers. There's something worth hiding. The harder she pushes, the louder the inquiries become. It's a strategy that's failing spectacularly, and she doesn't seem to realize it. Meanwhile, the royal family maintains its distance. King Charles, who should be spending precious time with his grandchildren, has virtually no visible relationship with Archie and Lilibet. The contrast with how he interacts with William's bunch is stark and impossible to ignore.
You can see for 10 miles that she was not really meaning anything. She kept organising pictures in a line, and she was...
Whether that's the Sussexes enforcing separation or the palace protecting itself, the optics are terrible for everyone involved. And then there's the financial trap they've created for themselves. They can't step away from the spotlight even if they wanted to, because they need the income from Netflix and their publishing contracts. They're stuck feeding the very machine that's destroying their credibility, producing content that keeps them in the headlines while those headlines get increasingly negative. It's a vicious cycle with no clear exit. The most heartbreaking part of all this is Archie and Lilibet. They didn't ask for any of this. They didn't choose to have their very existence examined by millions. They didn't decide to be kept separate from their grandfather and extended family. They didn't sign up to be the subject of endless speculation and analysis. They're just young ones caught in the middle of their parents' decisions and the consequences of those decisions. What's clear now is that deflection isn't shielding anyone. It's not safeguarding the couple's privacy. It's not shielding their offspring. It's not protecting their reputation or their relationships. All it's doing is allowing the concerns to fester and grow until they've become impossible to ignore. The pair who promised transparency and authenticity have become more secretive than the institution they claim to escape from. And that's where we stand. The Sussexes had an option. They could have been open, addressed concerns, provided answers, or they could have stayed silent and let speculation run wild. They chose deflection, and now they're living with the consequences of that decision. Each day that passes without answers, the damage gets worse.
The royal family treated Meghan and Harry today showed that they had very little sympathy towards them.
More weeks of avoidance make recovery harder. At this point, even if they eventually offer transparency, the trust is so broken that it might not matter anymore. The fairy tale they tried to sell has turned into something darker. And the only duo who can end it are the same two who seem determined to let it continue. So what do you think? Is the Sussex situation just about privacy like they claim? Or is there more to the story? Drop your honest take in the comments below. I read them all and I want to know where you stand. If what you just watched opened your eyes to something you hadn't considered before, hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss what we're covering next. Share it with anyone who's been following Harry and Meghan, because trust me, they need to see these perspectives. All right, catch you in the next one.